Hello there, this is Brennan Marr, host of Page Turners They Were Not, a Star Wars podcast. And I'm here to tell you about Anchor. Anchor is the best way to make a podcast. Why is that? Well, first off, it's free. Yes, you heard me right. Anchor is free. Anchor has all the tools you need to make a podcast from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you on various platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can make money from the podcast. And get this, with no minimum listenership. That means you can make money even if no one listens to your podcast. That, of course, is not ideal, as Anchor will allow you to spread your podcast, bring in more viewers, and you can make more money because of it. Everything you need to make a podcast is in one place on Anchor. If you're interested, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thank you, and may the Force be with you. Hello, everyone. My name is Brendan Marr, that noise you're hearing from my ventilator. And welcome to Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. A bit of sad news to begin with today. Max von Sydow, the actor who played Orson Tekka in The Force Awakens, has passed away at the age of 90. It was a small role that he had in The Force Awakens, but an important one, and he had some very, very good lines at the beginning, providing us the first hints on screen that Kylo Ren was connected to the Skywalker family, which turned out, of course, to be correct. So, a nice little side role, a small role, but with Star Wars, even small side characters live in fame in the minds of many fans. Orson Tekka will be no exception, I think. And so I was sad to see that. Max von Sydow has been one of my favorite actors. He is very identified with the films of Ingmar Bergman, the great Swedish filmmaker who is arguably one of the greatest filmmakers ever. Max von Sydow was also in movies like Conan the Barbarian and appeared, frequently in a lot of films and had a very long career. So I'd just like to pay a bit of respect to the great Max von Sydow. Rest in peace, and may the Force be with you. Today is a day when I would like to celebrate the editors of Star Wars, particularly Marcia Lucas. Now, yesterday was National Women's Day, and I thought today it would be fitting to discuss a behind-the-scenes contribution that a woman has made to Star Wars, and that woman is Marcia Lucas. She was married to George Lucas. They are no longer married, unfortunately. During the making of the original film, she was married to George Lucas. They divorced during the making of Return of the Jedi, but she was there during the very beginning of this great odyssey that George Lucas set out to make. Now, she was one of the editors, the team of 3 editors, Marcia Lucas, Paul Hirsch, and Richard Chew. Now, the original edit of Star Wars was, by all accounts, a complete disaster. And the clips that I have seen of the original edit were nightmarishly bad. George Lucas fired his editors and hired new ones, including his wife Marcia, as she was an editor. And they gave us the edit that we know today, which is nothing short of miraculous. In fact, I might venture to say that all modern movies, all post-Star Wars movies, not only have they been affected by the editing of Star Wars, but they went further by it's almost the standard by which all modern films are judged in terms of editing. Now, it's very interesting that the speed of the editing, especially during the action scenes, is faster than anything that had been known up to that point. And there were one or two film critics, most noticeably Pauline Kael, who pointed out that the editing was ridiculous. Now, Pauline Kael is often considered a quote-unquote enemy of Star Wars, but I think that's an exaggeration. Pauline Kael was a great film critic, one of the greatest who's ever worked in the industry of film criticism. She did not like Star Wars because she felt that the editing was so haphazard that it really didn't work. Now, to be fair, she did later say how much she absolutely loved The Empire Strikes Back. So there's been kind of a, I guess, rumor flying around that Pauline Kael hated Star Wars, and that's not true. That is not true. But I think that she brings up an interesting point. Now, I've read a bit of her review of Star Wars, and it was her feeling that the editing was done to hide the cheapness of the production. And I guess to her mind didn't do a very good job of hiding how quote-unquote bad a film it is. But I think she raises a good point. It is absolutely true that the editing is done to hide the B-movie quality of Star Wars and hide the bad stuff. And it absolutely is true. But you know what? I'm going to push back a little bit and say that's what editing is supposed to do. Editing is supposed to take the disaster of endless amount of film and try to give it and condense it into something that's actually presentable. I mean, because film, when it's not edited, is kind of a mess, and that's true of any movie. Unless it's, unless you're John Ford and you only film as much as you are going to put in the movie. Yeah, he did that. That's absolutely true. The great John Ford did that. He was an auteur. He did not want to hand his films over to somebody else to butcher it in the editing. So he's like, I'm only going to film what I need in sequence, and they're going to have to use it. But editing, with every film, is to show the best qualities, to hide the bad qualities, and to make sense of a jumbled mess of film. Now, it's interesting to note that with Pauline Kael and other critics pointing out how ridiculously fast the editing in Star Wars is, it's ironic that by modern standards, it's slow. Yeah. And everybody has taken their cues from Star Wars and even turned it up a notch. So, the edit by Marcia Lucas and her two teammates is basically what saved Star Wars. Now, if you're interested in more of the specifics, there is a YouTube video. I cannot remember the name of the person who does it, but the title is How Star Wars Was Saved in the Edit. I would highly recommend it because they explain what Marcia Lucas and team did with the second edit of Star Wars that made it the classic we all know and love today. There is one example I would like to say really quick as we wrap up. In the original edit of the film, the bad guy boardroom meeting scene comes before Obi-Wan explains to Luke what the Force is. So in the original edit, Darth Vader choking out Admiral Modi, or whatever commander or whatever his title was, that ends up being our first mention of the Force. When Vader says, don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed. The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force. That would have been the first mention of the Force. That doesn't really give us any explanation of what the heck it is. Of course, followed by Moti's line, don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways. Lord Vader, your sad devotion to that ancient religion is, blah, blah, blah. So that scene would have been the first mention of the Force. Looking at it, it doesn't make sense. It wouldn't work because the concept of what the Force is has not been established yet. So in Marcia Lucas's edit of the film, it was switched around so that the scene of Obi-Wan explaining the Force to Luke comes before the bad guy boardroom meeting scene, making it a lot more clear and explaining the Force before demonstrating it when Vader chokes out Modi. Also, that scene in the bad guy's boardroom does not explain at all what the Force is. It just mentions it. And I guess it expects the audience just to pick up on it. So bravo to Marcia Lucas and team for fixing it. Star Wars, as you probably know, went on to win the Academy Award for Best Film Editing, rightly so. Marcia Lucas deserves more praise than she gets. If you're interested to know more about some of the behind-the-scenes drama and the divorce and things like that, I would highly recommend How Star Wars Conquered the Universe by Chris Taylor. It's a great book. I don't really want to go into it here, but I believe that Marcia Lucas is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, unsung hero of the Star Wars franchise. And without her, I do not believe Star Wars would be the classic it is today. In fact, without her edit, Star Wars may have gone down as a disaster in the history books. So thank you, Marcia, for all you've done. My name is Brendan Marr, that noisy grains my ventilator, and thank you for tuning in to Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you.